Hello Kaiju fans, welcome back to the Kaiju World Order. My name is MM, and this is Monster of the Week, where I'm about to talk about a monster that was voted on by members of the Kaiju Hugbox Discord server that you can join by just following the links of this channel and yada yada yada. You know the drill by now, at least I hope so. And let's get right on into this. This is going to be a pretty quick one, not super deep into lore we're gonna get because there's not much to get into. And well, with that said, it is the Seaweed monster. This is actually my favorite of the Hanna-Barbera Godzilla monsters, appearing in episode 5, aptly called the Seaweed monster. This thing originates in the deep ocean and is first discovered by Brock and Dr. Quinn as they are looking for seaweed. And it ensnares Dr. Quinn as Brock's heading back to the surface, and eventually Godzuki is able to save her, and they manage to reach the surface. Just as they are reporting back to Captain Majors, the Seaweed monster pops up, but Godzilla is also called upon by Godzuki, and the King of the Monsters fights this bizarre seaweed thing, as the human characters just look on in awe as if they've never seen Godzilla fight a monster before now. Godzilla is able to drive it off with his laser beam eyes when they are fighting underwater, but unfortunately in the commotion, bits and pieces of the seaweed ended up falling onto the Calico's deck. While Godzuki found a little piece and just kicked it aside, Dr. Darien was able to find even more and was doing some research, and eventually figured out that the Seaweed monster's cells were energized to the point that when they would get too active, they would grow. And that's all we really got for the origin of this thing, and that's all we really need. By this time, the seaweed was growing out of control in the lab while everybody was eating lunch. It eventually grabs Pete, but Godzuki and crew are able to save him and eventually free the ship of the seaweed monster infestation. As they watched on sonar, pieces of seaweed all compiled together until it formed another giant seaweed monster, and was heading directly for the island, in which I believe was supposed to be Hawaii. By the time it reached the island, Godzilla was also called upon once again and saved a handful of beachgoers and began to fight the seaweed monster once more. However, as Godzilla tore pieces off of it, pieces began to grow back into the seaweed monster, and it was actually starting to give Godzilla a hard time. However, once Dr. Darien found pieces of the seaweed that dried up on the sun, she instructed Godzuki to tell Godzilla to bring the seaweed monster onto land in order to dry it out. And communicating with whatever noises they make, Godzilla was eventually able to drag the monster onto the beach. It put up a struggle, it tried to fight back, but eventually the sun burning down on it combined with Godzilla's fire just did way too much to it. It put up one final attempt to defend itself by protecting its face with a tree from Godzilla's laser beam eyes, but Godzilla's blast just burned it to a crisp, and the seaweed monster was quickly reduced to ash and never seen again. The end. I wish I could say that the seaweed monster has come back, and it has, and it's never going to. It's never gotten merchandise. It's not going to. I wish it would. It is my favorite of the Hanna-Barbera Kaiju, but yeah, the closest we could have ever gotten was a couple years ago when Hanna-Barbera did some comic, I believe it was with IDW, and a handful of these monsters popped up in one of the panels. The seaweed monster wasn't there, and considering it didn't show up there, I doubt it'll show up in anything anytime soon. I do think that sucks, because I'd like to talk about this thing some more. Unfortunately, as I said, there's nothing else to really talk about. Matt Frank has done a pretty cool, like, sketch redesign of the Seaweed monster that I want to bring up. I feel if this thing would come back in any sense, just give it like a decent name and expand its powers. I could see the Seaweed monster being some sort of eco-friendly Hedra, and by that I mean it is come together via seaweed instead of sludge, and just give it different evolutions, perhaps a flying form or something, who knows. And as for how it would deal with other monsters, well, it's seaweed. Honestly, depending on where this thing would make landfall, it might just get eaten by the local population. I could imagine a bunch of starving Japanese people just swarming it World War Z style with chopsticks and going to town. But yeah, it has no projectile attacks. It can grow really quick, and that's about all it has going for it. Its seaweed arms or tentacles are not super strong. We know they can, like, restrain a human and even Godzuki to a bit, but Godzuki was able to just break them by swimming enough. They did manage to trip up Godzilla in the water, and that was the most impressive thing they did. Other than that, they don't do anything. And it's also super weak to fire. Godzilla's atomic fire just burns it to a crisp, and not just that, but even the sun itself. It did not take that much time for the sun to really dry out the seaweed monster. Then even when it was in battle with Godzilla and tried to pull away by wrapping its arms around a rock, the rock being out in the sun was enough to actually burn the arm or the tentacle, whatever you want to call it, to the point it just ripped off. So yeah, this thing is not gonna survive in the long run. It's just gonna be very low on the food chain. I mean, it's fucking seaweed. And really, that's all, folks. Until next time, peace out, and Minya, take it away.
Zilla says you should like and subscribe.